So let's talk a little bit about the static plugins that we are going to see today. And then we can jump into the Eclipse and take a look to the source code and some of the examples that we have ready for you. So the static plugins was the first way of extending dotCMS. This was the first solution that we came up in order to extend or to override features that the dotCMS has. Adding custom functionality to our system for your requirements or needs. There are things that you can do with a static plugin that you cannot do with a dynamic plugin, and we are going to try to explain that difference in order to have a clear and you have all the points and all the ups and downs in order to choose between a static and a dynamic plugin. So basically, the static plugin is deployed when the server is off, and this is the bigger and the bigger difference between the static and the dynamic. The static plugin has to be deployed when the server is off. So just the very nature of that means that there are things that you can do with that. For example, if we have a WAR file, if we want to edit the web XML, maybe you need to add a new servlet or some security constraints or change some of the mappings. You can do this in a static plugin because this kind of plugin is deployed when the server is shut down, when the server is off. So we are talking J2EE stack. This happens in WebFirs, in Tomcat. This is not a dotCMS behavior. This is just a Java app server sub. So basically, the first way to extend dotCMS with the static plugins is just like creating a process, the deploying of the plugins, try to create this, make this process automatic. The process that you will do, shutting your server off, changing or updating something in the web XML, or maybe replacing manually some of the JSP, or maybe compiling some of the sources that you might have. We try to come up with a solution that you can do this automatically and inside of our source code and also inside of our official distribution. As you can see here, there are several things that we can do with the static plugins. We can change the configuration settings. Remember that yesterday I manually updated some of the configurations properties that we had. I went into the webinf classes folder and changed the property files directly. Then I just needed to restart the server. That's a bad way, and we are going to talk about it in a few minutes, but that's the not recommended way to do it. We have the static plugins to do so. We can overwrite and we can create new velocity macros. The view tools, the ones that we talked a few minutes ago. Also, we can implement some of the new DWR or Jersey interfaces. The portlets, we can add new portlets. We can add new pages to dotCMS. And also we can interact with the JSP, the strokes, and the Springs portlets. The static plugins have a proprietary hierarchy, directory hierarchy that we came up for our best interest. They allow you to change dotCMS configuration. You can add and you can even replace files that exist in any directory in the dotCMS installation. From a support standpoint, we really recommend our clients to use the static plugin to add or modify configuration properties instead of changing the installation files directly. It will be easier for you and you will avoid situations where you accidentally change property that you didn't mean to and just see the properties that you have customized. This will be clear when we see the first example, but basically the properties, we have a lot of properties inside our source code, and it is pretty day-to-day work for the clients to change those properties. For example, we have several properties that you need to change in order to create a cluster. And let's say that you want to take out those assets and .secure folders, you have to change another property. The database configurations, there are no properties, but it's managed like a property file. So basically, there are several things, a lot of things that you can change, a lot of properties and files that you can change inside .cms. So in order to make it easy for the clients to have just one place when you can change and update those things, we created the static plugins. So we really recommend, because we have seen clients where they have all the changes, where they have updated all the properties directly on the files, and in the future they don't remember what or which properties they changed or why they changed those properties. Maybe they want to upgrade the server, or maybe they want to emulate the production environment inside of the local environments of each of the developers, and they don't have an easy way to do that. They have to go inside all the files that we have in our Tomcat and try to figure out what changed from the last time that they upgraded or that they updated the local machines. So basically, we recommend this because this is going to be a single place where you have all the configurations and all the files that you change it inside .cms. So, for example, when you upgrade a .cms server, you can just grab the static plugin. This is a folder. The static plugin is a folder, and move that, just copy and paste over to the new code without having to go through several configuration files to get the properties that you change, to put them into the new installation, or share those folders, those static plugins among the developers. It is a lot easier to do it this way. Another scenario that we have seen clients will be if you get errors when you start up your instance. You can just undeploy. This is very important. We have the deploy and the undeploy processes. You can just undeploy the plugin and have your system use the default properties, so you can track down what's causing your environment to fail. For example, there have been clients that change, I don't know, 10, let's say 10 properties inside the static plugin. But in the next release, or let's say that in the next, they are going to upgrade to the 4.2.2, the latest release, and they are coming from the 3. There was a client a couple of weeks ago. They were coming like from 3.3.1 or something like that. So a lot of configuration files or a lot of properties that they had in that release, they didn't, or they don't exist right now. So basically .cms was failing in some parts to start up the instance. So basically what they just have to do is just to remove the static plugin, just to undeploy and figure out which of the new properties, which of the old properties are not in the new source code. And the release notes can help with that. But basically they just undeploy it, figure out the properties, and they just deploy it again. And it was pretty easy for you, pretty straightforward to figure out that. So bottom line, any alteration you want to do to the .cms, it could be Java code, it could be new JSP files, it could be new XML, it could be an alteration to the web XML of Tomcat. Any alteration or extension should be done via plugin. It could be a static plugin or it could be a dynamic plugin, but any alteration should be, and this is very important, any alteration should be done via a plugin. Also keep in mind that this is very important. Static plugins are executed in alphanumeric order. I think it's ascendant order. So a plugin called A will be deployed before a plugin called C. As you're going to see with our examples, you can call, you can name your plugin whatever you want. So you have to take this into account when deploying plugins, because you could have several plugins depending on the new features that are developed, uh, and maybe you forgot to, or you are trying to override the same class, or you are trying to override the same file in both of the plugins. So you need to be aware of the order that these are going to be deployed, because depending on the folder, I'm going to explain you about the directory and the layout. Depending on the directory that you place that file, that could be merged, or or those files could be replaced completely. There are some disadvantages also for the static plugins. The classes is not a disadvantages percent, but you have to understand that the classes compile in this type of plugin run in the same class path as dotCMS. They are sent under the webbing classes directory, and they share the same context as the dotCMS classes. And as far as the J2EE specs concerned, the application server will always pick up a class in the webbing classes in that class loader before picking up something in the jar file in the webbing live folder. That's how the class loader works, and the webbing classes come first. So basically, let me just show you in the file system. Here we have the Tomcat. I'm going into the Tomcat web apps root webinf, and we have two places where the classes or the jar files could be living. We have the classes, the all compiled classes here in the webinf classes folder, and also we have the live folder. This is where all the jar files live. For example, some of the properties and other compiled classes live here under the webbing class. So both folders are under the Tomcat Web Apps root webbing folder. But basically, the class loader, when Tomcat starts, the class loader is going to pick or is going to try to find that class first here in these classes, and then if it doesn't exist here, it's going to try to find it here in the light folder. So what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to explain here is that when you compile a static plugin that has Java classes, they are going to live here in the classes folder. They are also going to be exported as a jar file here in the live folder, but the important thing here to understand is that they are going to be compiled against the classes that you have here. So the next time that you start dotCMS, all the classes that are living inside dotCMS, inside the static plugin, are going to take priority against the ones that are compiled in form of a jar by default inside the live folder. So let's say that you are going to, I don't know, you want to override a class that has a REST endpoint, and you want to return some other, instead of JSON, you want to return an XML, something like that. So basically, we have inside the live folder, we have the dotCMS, and let me just find it. We have the dotCMS jar file here. Here we have the enterprise, and also we have the dotCMS. Just where's dotCMS? Here we have the compile.cms, and also we have the enterprise jar file. So basically all of our source code is living right now here, our default source code. So if you go ahead and you create a static plugin, and you can override a specific class that we already have in our .cms jar file, and you put it in a static plugin, you deploy that is going to be living in this folder, the classes. So the next time that .cms starts, is going to pick up that class, the new one, the one that you are overriding, before the one that we have in the jar file inside the live folder. And that's how we manage to override things inside .cms, at least the source code classes. So you need to be aware of that the classes, that's how we handle the override, and that the classes are going to live in the same class loader. That's another difference between the static and the dynamic plugins, and we are going to see tomorrow. The dynamic plugins live, they have different class loaders. It could be a benefit for you depending on what you're trying to do. Okay. Also, keep in mind that some of the things in static plugins are old because this was the first solution to extending .cms. So we are trying to encourage, or we are trying to develop ways to do the same things, or most of the same things in static plugins and also in dynamic plugins. The dynamic plugins are easier to build and they can be handled like different projects. So for most developers or developers that are used to the OSGI frameworks, it's easier for them to use just the OSGI frameworks. But keep in mind that there are things that you cannot do with the dynamic plugins, so you still have to do via static plugins. Most of the things are overriding things and also modifying the properties that you have inside .cms. Okay, so let's take a look to our Eclipse environment and some of the source code that I wanted to show. Let me just open Eclipse. Okay, let me close this one and the other one. And I'm going to remove that breakpoint that we put in the remote debug yesterday. Okay, let's take a look to our GitHub first. The repository is .cms and the project is core. One important thing that you need to be clear, because you are going to be taking a look inside the .cms repository and you need to find a way to walk around our branches and our tags. Basically, we have a different branch, as you can see here. We have a different branch for every issue that we are working on. So all of these issues that have here a branch are currently being working on by our R&D department. So basically, the workflow that developers do is that they grab a task from the boards, from the springboards that we have, and they create a new branch from the, let's say that they are working in the next release. So from master, that's the main branch that we have. From master, they create a new branch and they work on that. They solve the issue, they create a unit and integration test, and then they submit that pull request in order to be reviewed by our R&D department and also by Jenkins. They apply the feedback and then that's merged inside our main source code. So basically, when you go into the branches inside the core, you're going to see all the issues that we are working on right now. And also we have the tags tab that we saw yesterday. We have a tag for every release that we have done in, it's like 3 or 3.5 years. We have a tag, so you can go back and take a look on what the code look like in a certain moment in dotCMS. This is very important because let's say that you are modifying or overriding a class for a client that is in an old release. You need to be aware that you need to go into that specific tag. For example, you are developing a new feature against 372 and you are overriding a class that we have right now in dotCMS. So you need to start that new code from the class that we had in here, because maybe we have changed some signatures, or maybe we have some methods that they were not inside that code in the latest master, in the latest source code. It could create some conflict. So that's why we have all the tags and all the branches inside the dotCMS core project. Also, let's do a quick recap here in the terminal. Here I am under the training project and the core. This is the checkout GitHub core source code. Sorry, I am going to do a Gradle. Remember to always use the. Sorry, we have to go inside the .cms. So it's going to be core and .cms because that's where our main Gradle project lives. And here we are going to call Gradle W and tasks. As I mentioned it before, if you go back into the 3.x series of .cms, you're going to see, let me just show you. You are going to see, for example, for 3.5 or something like that, well, 3.7. You're going to see that our core folder was the main Gradle project, but it was not a Gradle project per se. It was a wrapper around the and scripts that we have from the beginning of the .cms. So, for example, you can see here the build XML, and it had a lot of the old tasks that we were calling through the Gradle wrapper. So basically, in the 3 series of .cms, we were just wrapping around the and calls that we have here. And now, in the latest, in beginning on the 4.0, we changed everything. We changed the hierarchy and the .cms. It's basically most of the things are Gradle, are pure Gradle. So basically, if you go into the build Gradle, you're going to see all of the and tasks, all the old and tasks has been translated into the pure Gradle scripts. Another difference between the old .cms and the new .cms structure is that before we had a light folder. At some point, we had a light folder with all the libraries inside the same repository. So whenever you wanted to check out the .cms complete repository, it was a mess. It will take like 30 minutes or something like that, depending on the bandwidth. But it was downloaded like 3 gigs of information because we were also downloading everything inside the library folder. At that point, we were not using, because we were using Ant and we were not using any Maven or any Gradle dependency framework or pattern. So all of our jar files were living inside a folder. I think it was like WebInf like folder, and it was full of libraries. But now in the version 3 and 4 of .cms, you don't get those libraries immediately when you clone the repository. You need to run any of the Gradle tasks, and it will automatically download everything. It will install the version that we need for that for that release, and also is going to download all the libraries from the Artifactory, and they are not in Git anymore. All of those dependencies are in a file that it's called dependencies.gradle right here. As you can see, we have a lot of third-party libraries that we use in dotCMS, and this is coming from, let me just show you, inside the build.gradle, we have our repositories, and it is coming from the repo.cms.com. So let's go into that. This is our Artifactory tool that we use in order to handle all of those libraries. This allows us to keep track of the different versions of the jar files that we have used. We can also provide backwards compatibility for clients running older versions. So, for example, you want to run the 3.5 version, the source code. It will download the specific libraries that we were using at that point, because we have several. We have all of the versions of the jar files that we have used since 3.0 inside of the source code. And also, we managed to decrease a lot the size of the dotCMS core repository in GitHub to make it easier and faster to check out. Let me just show you the artifacts here. And also, we have all of the groups of dotCMS. We can open some of the classes here. Let me just show you. For example, we have a lot of the third-party libraries here. I think this is for the release versions. We also have the snapshot versions, and also we have a group for our own dotCMS and enterprise jar files. So you can take a look to these things here. I didn't talk about this yesterday, but we actually repackage the libraries we use in order to avoid collisions problems when deploying as dotCMS in application servers. This gives us some protection to make sure that the things that we are deploying will work as expected. And this is something that you need to keep in mind depending on how deep you want to interact in dotCMS. As you can see, and as I told you yesterday, we don't have to install Gradle, or we don't have to install Ant anymore. We just run Gradle W, the wrapper, and it will install everything that you need. It will install the Gradle that we ship with, and we specify the version of Gradle just so we have a type control here. And you just have to worry about running the commands, and everything should work. And again, if you go and see the Gradle task in the terminal, you can see a list of the different tasks that you have, and a small descriptions with each of the tasks that are pretty helpful. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about the scripts that we saw yesterday in order to start and to shut down the dotCMS server when you are working from the source code, as most of the developers are going to be working with. If you go into the Tomcat 8 and bin folder, let me just go into that. Well, actually, maybe I can open that in a text editor. Just spline and Tomcat 8. Let me just drag this down. Okay, so inside the Tomcat folder, inside the bin directory, you will notice several scripts for Unix and Windows. For development and for debugging, you have to use the .startup.sh or the .shutdown.sh scripts to start or stop your server if you are in a Unix-based instance or OS. If you are running in a Windows environment, you have also the .bat extensions that you have to use in there. As I told you yesterday, the other files like the standard startup here and the shutdown, uh, they are not set up correctly for the right memory and other configuration parameters. When you download the distribution, the startup scripts contain different configuration parameters since the whole project structure is different, as we saw yesterday. The Tomcat, remember that the Tomcat is in different location. There is a bin folder outside the Tomcat plugins directory. Also, there is the .server directory where the Tomcat lives inside of that. So the whole packaging inside the distribution is different than the one that we are seeing right now here. So let's talk about the .startup file. Let me just open .startup file and go into the most important lines that we have in this file. Let's talk about this here in the line 59. Let's talk about the suspend, this option, the last one, the suspend. Right now, by default, this line is comment out, but you just have to go into this one and just comment uncomment this line if you want to use it. But this suspend option that you see here, this one, the suspend parameter is very useful when debugging low-level functionality in dotCMS. Setting that value to a Y, to a yes, will cause the Tomcat to stop, to halt during the startup process. This is not a dotCMS feature. This is how the remote debugging works in Tomcat, in case you haven't done it before. And it will only continue with the system initialization until we attach the remote debugger. This will give you all the time that you need, so you can hit the breakpoint you set, for example, in some of the first upgrade tasks, the first servlets, or maybe filters. So this is just a cool and a tip that you need to be aware of. Remember also that we are still using a clean install of the .cms, so we are using the H2 database. The database and its structures, the demo data, the assets, they need to be built the first time. The Elasticsearch index is being created as well, and also all the caching structures and configuration are being built. So the first time that you start .cms from a clean instance, it will take a little while to finish. So let's go ahead and start seeing. Well, let me just do a Gradle W clean, and then I often run the Gradle W clean at least once a day, just to keep a clean instance in here. Let me just do a git status to make sure we haven't changed anything. So we are still working on the 4.2.2. This is the latest release, and we are working on the tag from the GitHub repository. Again, the enterprise, you might not see it because you don't have access to that, but this is what I've been modifying here in my local. And also there is a key ignore that we can actually ignore. So after the Gradle clean, let's do a Gradle deploy war Tomcat. Remember the difference between the deploy war Tomcat and deploy war Tomcat backup. The backup is going to preserve, or is going to try to preserve the assets.secure folders in order to be able to continue your work. Let's say that you are creating a page, a training page, or a demo page where you are testing your view tools or something like that. So that's a good way to not lose, or to not to build everything again after each deploy work Tomcat. But right now we are going to start from a clean instance. So let's wait until this compiles and it's done. Gradle has a cool feature that it knows when you change something in your source code. And this time, because of the Gradle clean that I did, it doesn't have anything in the build folder. So the next time it's going to know if I change something inside the source code. If I did, it's going to try just to build that specific part of the project, depending on the place where it is. But it's very cool because the amount of seconds or minutes decrease depending if you are just compiling one class or maybe you are compiling a lot of more changes. Okay, it's created a WAR file and it's deploying the WAR file inside the Tomcat folder. Let's start dotCMS. Let's wait. Okay. And now we have to start dotCMS. So it's going to be under the Tomcat bin dot startup sh. We just see going to undo changes. And I'm going to start up. I am going to send the debug option. The debug option is what I wanted to explain here. If the startup sh found a debug option in here, it's going to set up the debug port as 8000 by default, but you can change it. You could always set debug and I don't know 8001 or 9000 or something like that. And that's because sometimes maybe, at least from our standpoints, let's say we are developing against a new push polish feature or we are testing something in the cluster environment, we need to be able to run several dotCMS instances in the same local machine. So this is a cool way to just send a new port in order to have different ports debugging it. Okay, let's see if the secure folder is ready. Tomcat, reverse, root, secure, logs, CMS. Okay, and it's trying to start everything here. We close the Artifactory page and the demo page. We don't need it because we are going to be able to see our localhost. Okay, let's wait until it's ready. Okay, we are ready. Let's log in. Okay, let's take a look to the system and maintenance and the indexes here. Everything looks good, so we can continue with the examples that we are going to take a look today. So basically, what I want to do now is to take a look to our plugin, to the static plugin, and start playing around it. Basically, we have a repository for all of our examples in static plugins and also with the dynamic plugins. The repository is called plugin seeds. Let me just send you see if I can write it down. Okay, so the repository inside the dotCMS GitHub page, it's called plugin seeds, and I have it already inside uh, my environment. So one important thing also that you need to be aware of is that we have branches depending on the release that we want to run against. So for example, we have the release 4.1, 4.11, 4.2, to 1 and to 2. In this case, what I wanted you to do is to clone or to download this repository and play with, well, and check out this release 4.2.2. And that's the one that I'm working right now. It's up to date. So right now I place, it doesn't matter where you place this repository, but I place it next to the, yes, sure, next to the core. Here you can see the plugin seeds repository. And inside the plugin seeds repository, we have a couple of folders, the OSGI. This is the one that we are going to see tomorrow, and the static ones. Now, let's take a look to those static ones. Okay, so basically we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have like, actually this skeleton one, it is not an example. It is like a basic plugin where you can start writing your own static plugin. So this is just like an example of a basic and an empty plugin with all the folders, some of the configurations, and with all the build and the Gradle infrastructure inside it. So you can just go ahead and copy and paste it and start working on your own. But the other ones are working, and we are going to take a look to those examples in just a few moments. So let's take a look to one of the plugins that we ship by default. Because if you go ahead and go into the Tomcat 8 folder, sorry, let me just show you here. I'm going to open the official distributions. For example, the latest release, well, the 4.2.1 release, if you take a look to inside that release, you're going to see, besides the bin, docs, and docs server folder, the plugins folder. And this plugin folder will always contain the same. It will always contain the plugins and commons XML files. Those files, you don't have to change it, you don't have to update it. It doesn't. It is not relevant for you. It's some of the logic that we use in order to deploy and undeploy the things. But this one, the com.cms config, this is a default plugin. You can change its name, but it is very important that, and this is what support recommends, and it's to update all the properties and everything through this plugin. It doesn't matter the name, as I already said, but please keep in mind that if you are going to update or if you're going to modify, override a property, please do it in a single place, in a single static plugin. Because if you start modifying several things in different static plugins, different properties, you could end up with overriding the latest plugin files. So at the end, it's going to just work with the latest plugin that is deployed, and it's going to override everything else. So be very careful about that, mostly with overriding files and with overriding properties. And it is a best practice to just do it in one static plugin, just in one place. And that also remembers me that I wanted to show you the directory layout of the static plugins. As you can see here, we have several directories, several folders, and each of those folders do something different inside the static plugin. So the static plugin doesn't require all of this folder in each of the plugins, but it doesn't do any harm to have it. But depending on the name of the folder that you put your file, is going to do several things different. So for example, the configuration file is mostly for setting and overriding property values. For example, and that's the one that we are going to do, the .marketing config x properties. Also, we have a JSP file here, JSP folder. The JSP folder, everything inside the JSP folder are going to be copied under the .cms HTML plugins, and then the plugin name, in this case, it will be com.cms config, and then you will find out, you will see the JSP. If you put anything inside the light folder, mostly is for third-party libraries, jar files, those contents are going to be copied under the WebInf Lite folder. If you put something inside root, this one, the files are going to be copied. And if you put the same name of the file that we already shipped with, that is going to be overwrite. That's going to overwrite the file that is already in place. And also the source is going to be the place where you put all the Java files that are going to be compiled. And remember, they are going to be placed under the WebInf classes as .class files. And they are going to be placed also as a jar file under the WebInf Live folder. So basically, and we have several more in here, basically most of these folders do something different. You can take a look to our documentation inside the static plugins to understand what you can do with those files. One important thing is the difference between the conf and the root, because sometimes it's confusing for the clients or for the new developers. The root folder is going to replace or is going to set copy any of the files that are under there. And the conf, any file inside the conf is going to be merged with the original file. So this inside the conf is going to be merged with the original file. So it's going to add a special section where you can see the new properties or override properties. But in this one, the root folder, that's going completely override. So for example, if you put a property file inside the root, that's going to completely override that property file. Also with images or JSP or HTML pages, everything under root, they don't care about what is in place. They are going just to copy and paste and replace everything in the same path that you put here in the root. So we are going to see a difference, an example of this difference using a property right now. So let me just shut down the server. Remember that the requirement for .cms static plugins is that the server has to be shut off in order to deploy that. So let me just go ahead and shut down this server. And go back to my Eclipse. So just like the distribution, we also have inside the source code, we also have the same plugins folder and also the same default one. So let me just take a look here under source, main, and plugins. As you can see here, we have the same plugin XML, the common XML. You don't have to worry about these ones. And also we have the com.cms config. the same hierarchy that we have in the distribution. Nothing changed here inside the plugin folder between the distribution and between the source code. Everything works just the same. You don't need to be aware of any difference here. So what I wanted to do is to create a new property here. Let me just go inside the conf. Remember that the conf folder is the one where we play around with the properties. And let me just add inside the .marketing config. Remember that yesterday we altered the .marketing config without this -x part name. It was the .marketing config properties. Let me just show you inside the Tomcat training, Tomcat, web apps, root, web beans, and classes. This one was the one that we changed yesterday, the .marketing config .properties, and this is the .marketing config and -x. This means that this is an extender file of this one, of the .marketing config property. So let me just open this. Basically, this is empty because we haven't added any of the properties that we want to modify. So what I want to do is to add a new property. Maybe you are developing a new feature and you need several properties. This is how you will do it. So for example, my prop equals test me. And I'm going to save that file. And now I am going to go back into the project, into the Gradle project, and I am going to do a Gradle deploy war Tomcat. Remember that as part of the compiling and all the process of the deploy war Tomcat task, this is going to deploy the plugins, and that's what I hope to see inside the Tomcat 8. So right now we are modifying something in our source code inside the default plugin, this one, and we are trying to find out what happens with that property, this one, the new one. So okay, let's wait, and we can take a look to the Sublime that we were seeing some moments ago. Okay, the web apps is empty. Okay, the root folder is there. Let's wait until everything is compiled. Okay, and that's it. Build successful. And let me just go into the web apps, root, web inf, classes, the same path where the property file was living, and open the marketing config properties. And let me just search for my prop. As you can see here, my prop, the one that we added in here, is now part of the marketing property files, the default one. And as you can see, we merged, because this was the original data that we have here. We just merged with the new plugin data in here. One important thing is that dotCMS, the deploying of the static plugin, it extends with these properties. It uses those command lines. Our plugin uses them to remove and search for the extended properties using regular expression. So you don't need or you don't want ever to alter in any way, because we need these comments here in order to undeploy, because remember that we have the deploy and the undeploy process. When we undeploy this process, we want to search for this specific plugin and delete everything that we added via that plugin. So let's take a look to another example with properties. And what I want to do now is, for example, this one, the publisher queue max tries. This is a push publish process, and the property here tells that every time that we want to push publish and by any reason it fails, we want to try it at least 3 more times. So this is what it's doing, and we want to override this property. So for example, we don't want to try this 3 times, but just once, and set up that as a failing. Okay, it's building the workspace. That's it. I'm still with the server shut off. And let me just go again and do another deploy war Tomcat. So we can take a look at how this file looks after the deploy war Tomcat. Okay, so it's deployed, and let's take a look to the file, the same file that we were looking at a few minutes ago. Webinf, classes, and the .marketing config properties. And let's take a look to my prop here. Well, this is the new one, my prop testing me, and this is the one that we are overriding, the publishing queue mastery. So what it does is the logic inside the deploying of the static plugin follow this workflow. If the property already exists, like this one, is going to try to comment it out. So let me just show you the other one. Just like this, we are using the same, the comments lines in order to add some of the things here. And we are commenting out this one, so this value is not going to be in place. And we are adding the ones that we are using right now in the plugin. And in the other case, this is in the case that the property already exists in there. In the other case, that the property doesn't exist, so this one is going to be just added. It doesn't need to comment out anything. So basically, that's how the properties files work inside dotCMS, and that's why I keep telling you that this is the supported way to do it. Because, for example, let's say that you have several new properties and also several properties that you need to override its value. You can write down these properties in here. Instead of what I did yesterday, that I was looking for the property inside the big property file, and then I don't have a way to differentiate the property values, the default ones with the new ones, and it will be a complete mess to try to emulate these properties inside another production server or after an upgrade. So basically, that's why we recommend the using of static plugins. You can have everything inside of one plugin and just grab that plugin, you just copy it and paste it in the new server or maybe in your local machine, and you will have the same properties and the same configuration for any other things that you might want to do. Let's do another example now. Okay, remember that anything inside here in the root directory, these are not merged. They are overriding, and the original file, this original file will be placed into a backup location. In order you are able to undeploy your plugin and just grab the default one and put it in the default place. If you need to make multiple changes to the same file, they need to be included in one plugin only. Otherwise, the last plugin to be deployed will overwrite all changes done by the previous plugins. So regarding the plugin packaging, some people ask whether it's a plugin, if the plugin is a jar or it is not a jar. Well, the answer is both. It is a jar file if it contains the source code, and it is not a jar file because there are some properties and some other files that are not part of that source folder. So as you just saw, the plugin is inside the plugins folder. This one right now is the com.cms config. And for the most part, essentially, it is a proprietary structure that we came up to customize .cms. So what you really have to do, for example, is just zip this plugin folder and unzip it under the plugins directory. And that's it. You will have the same configuration in a remote server as well. This is a manual task, mostly done by the sys admins. You send your folder, your static plugin to the system administrator, and he will place it under the correct location. Remember that what I mentioned a few moments ago, that we can override .cms classes to extend functionality, fixing issues, anything that you want. And that's how we do it in support. For example, we have what we call the hot fixes in support. Let's say that the client installs the latest version and it finds a problem. The client submits a support ticket, and the R&D developing team, the R&D team, find out that it's a bug in our code. So how do we fix that? We use the static plugins that we call as hotfix, and we include the new class with the bug solve, the bugs fix, and we just give you that static plugin, and you have just to install it in your server. When you undeploy that hotfix or that static plugin, that's going to override the class inside the webim classes, and everything will be fine. Also, if we take a look to this folder structure of the plugin, you can see that also has a folder called light folder, which is what you might expect is used to contain any third-party library that your custom code is going to need. There are situations where two or more static plugins use the same jar file or the same jars in the live folders. So just so you know, there is no problem with this because the deployment of the plugin takes those libraries and copies them over the webim live folder. So if you have the same library, it will just overwrite the jar file that was already there. You just have to be very careful, of course, when your plugins use different versions of the same library, because in the end, .cms will have several jars with the same classes in the same class path. If they have different names, given the different version numbers, so you're probably going to get several problems and will need to fix that yourself manually. Okay, we already saw the deploy word Tomcat and how this deploys our new properties. I think it's time to start playing around the other examples. What I want you to do now is to go into the plugin seeds folder, grab the static one, and copy everything except the skeleton one, because the skeleton is an empty plugin. So copy the hook, the macro, the portlet, the servlet, and the view tool. Just copy those and paste it under the plugins folder in Eclipse. So basically, this plugins folder is going to be under source, well, inside the .cms folder, under source, main, and plugins. So we are going to paste it up inside the plugins. We just paste it in here, and they will end up next to the config that we already had in here. So we now have all the static plugins that we need. Let me just shut down the server. I think it's yeah, off. And let's do another gradle deploy with Tomcat in order to deploy everything that we just pasted in this folder. And it will compile everything. Some of these plugins have some source Java classes. It will compile everything. It will try to merge all the properties, and it will alert us of any of the problems that you might encounter. Seems like everything is working just fine in there. So now we already deployed. We are creating the WAR file. Okay, guys, let's start with the first example that we have here. It's the one that is called com.cms macro. If you open that example inside the com folder, let me just close this and minimize this. Okay, so let's take a look to this one, the com.cms macro and the macro x VM. This is basically a simple hello world macro, nothing fancy. When you call this, it will just print the Spring hello world macro, as you can see. The macros inside Velocity are old school. The macros are useful for some kind of things, but it's not that recommended across Velocity to do it several times inside of the same Velocity code or the same page, just to be aware of. But right now we are just using this one. The hello world macro is going to be replaced by the hello world macro as is in here. So this is the key, and this is what we are going to see inside the dotCMS when this one is replaced or is rendered through the Velocity. This is a basic example. It's a better way to customize your site, but we can see this in action as a proof of concept, and I will need just to go back to the server. Let's see if everything started just fine. Seems like it. I'm going to hit the admin site. Remember that we have .admin, admin, or /c as shortcuts to this .admin page. Okay, and let me just go admin.cms.com and admin. Basically, if we go to the default files inside the Tomcat 8, inside web apps, root, webinf, and velocity, you will find a file. You will see a file that is called .cms. Let me just find it. It's .cms library extender. And if you open it, you are going to see our example macro in here, as you can see it. So whatever you stick in the macros extender VM, in this one, inside the plugin, it's going to end up making its way into the .cms library extender. This is the one that Tomcat is running right now. Macros are just a collection of Velocity code that, depending on the task you want to do, they are not very performant. But in case you want to give them a shot, this is how you can do it. So let's go back to the backend of the .cms. Let's create a new page inside the site and browser. Choose this. Let's create a new folder first. It's going to be called training, save, and inside this training folder I'm going to create a page. It's going to be training page, automatically fill with the URL and file name. The host of folder is going to be inside the training. The template, I don't want to use really any template, so let's go with the blank template. And the cache TTL, just in order to see everything automatically, I'm going to set up a zero cache TTL. Save and publish. We are not going to see anything because we chose the blank template, but just clicking the log for editing here. And then we have the add content. Just click on the add content and new content. No, let's use a new add, the add widget here. And a simple widget here in the left pane, and then click on this button, create a new simple widget. So basically, the log, the add content, the add widget, simple widget, and create new simple widget. This is going to be our training widget. Doesn't matter the name that you put. And the code that we have here is just surround with some H1, and in here, how we reference that macro is using the key that we gave to it, and also in velocity we use the pound or the number sign with the key that we have in here. So this one, hello world, and then just the parentheses, and save and publish. You can see the result, which is basically printing some text when it is called in the macro. So basically that key just it's rendered in here by the dotCMS library extender DM. So we are printing this one, the hello world macro. And how did we get this inside this? It was through the static plugin that is called dotCMS Macro. So a very simple, straightforward example. What I'm going to take a look now, it's a little more complex example. And what we want to do now is to deploy a servlet that is contained in another of our plugin examples. So let me just open up, let me just close this one. I'm going to close this macro. We can go ahead and open this servlet example in here. And inside the servlet example, we can take a look to the conf and the web extender XML. Just like the other ones, like the other property files and everything inside the conf folder, we have the web-x, that means the extender XML. So basically what this means is that we are going to extend the original web XML file. There is a servlet in here that is called Hello World Servlet, as you can see here. The Hello World Servlet with a specific mapping to access that class. And the class, Hello World Servlet, and the class is going to be here in the same static plugin. Let's take a look to that one. Under the same plugin is going to be under source com.cms, servlet, and hello world servlet. Okay, so basically this hello world servlet is the one that we are referencing right here using this hello world servlet. It is not highly complex at all. As you can see, it is a simple Hello World servlet that we are writing. So let me just go into, see, here in the README, each of the plugins that we have in our repo, the static and the dynamic, they have a small README. And how to use it. So basically in the localhost 8080 that we are running right now, inside Servlet's plugin hello, that's the mapping that we put it here, Servlet's plugin hello, we are being able to access that servlet. So let's go into dotCMS and copy this. But first I am going to sign out, to log out. And here I'm going to paste this. Okay, so like I was telling you, this is a very simple, we are just writing out the Hello World servlet to the output stream. It is working just fine. We can try to remote debug this real quick. So I will just go back to the Eclipse and let me just start the remote debugging service. Remember that also we had to start dotCMS with the .start up and debug option. Let me just go back to the Eclipse trying to see if this is working. I am moving to the perspective, the debug this perspective here. I am seeing all the threads, so seems like it is attached to the dotCMS instance. And let's drop a breakpoint in this class, the one that is coming from our static plugin. So I'm putting a breakpoint in here, and I'm going back to the browser and reloading this page. Okay, so Eclipse doesn't know yet what is our source code or where is our source code, because we just configured the main source code that we have inside the core project. But in this case, the Hello World servlet, he doesn't know how to attach it to a Java class, to source code. So that's why we are seeing this source not found error. So let's try to edit this one and try to add that Java. Let's see if we can add the Java project or if we have to add it just like other. Okay, so seems like we cannot add from here. Let's see if we can add it through here. And if not, I can show you how to do this in the other way. Well, actually, let's do it the proper way. Just cancel everything. I am going to just disconnect the remote debugging. I'm going to back to the Java property. Okay, so basically, the Java plugins, each of the Java plugins, the static and the dynamic plugins, can be handled by Eclipse or by your IDE as a different project, as a independent project. And that's why we have all the Gradle framework configured for each of these ones. At the end, for the static plugins, you will still need to copy that plugin inside the plugins folder, just like we did at the beginning. But in the meantime, when you are developing against the .cms, you are going to be able to manage each of these static plugins as an independent project. So that's what we can do right here. Let me just close this and try to create a new. Let's see if we can import this as a Gradle project. In the latest Eclipse, I think this is by default. The Gradle is installed by default, but I have seen some of the old Eclipse versions that you need to go into the marketplace here. Let me just into the Eclipse marketplace. Let's just wait and search for the Gradle plugin and install it from here. But seems like the latest version of Eclipse, it already has it installed by default, so we don't have to worry about that. So I was just right clicking here, new, or just going to file, new. I'm going to choose other. I'm going to choose Gradle project in here. I'm going to click next. Okay, I don't want to see this page again. I don't want to use the default location. I am going to use the project inside. Let's see if we can try to overcome the. Let me just go into, just do a small test. Go into dotCMS, training, core, sorry, core dotCMS. Let me just source main plugins and add the plugin that we are working with right now. It was the Servlet one. So open this project. Let's put it Servlet. Okay, it's finished, and let's see if Eclipse allows this. I know that IntelliJ does, but let's see if we are able to install this. Okay, so this one is inside, this is the same one that we have inside of the main plugins. This one, the Servlet. So let's try to close this and just use the one. So basically, sorry, here in under source, main, Java, now seems like it's not letting me to doing this. Yeah, I guess it's because we already have it included in there. Let me just delete this project. No. And we can install the default one, the original one. So with project next, the default location will be the ones that we check out, and it's going to be under training, plugin seats, static, and the Servlet one. Let's copy this name here, and let's click on finish. And let's see if now we can see. Seems like what's this? Let me just do something here because seems like it's picking up another. Set it as a not as a Gradle project, but as an existing Java project. Let's set it as a Java project, and let's see if this works. Static.servlet. Next, finish perspective for the Java project. And let's see if this works. Okay, yeah, but it's not including. Let me just go back to I think I know what it is. It will be this project. I'm going inside the static com.cms servlet. Okay, by some reason I have another com.cms servlet in here. Oh, servlet. Okay. Gradle tasks. Okay. Gradle clean. And then seems like I have an old version of the class path and project inside these ones. Maybe it's from another training, so I'm going to remove those dot project and dot class path. Okay, ignore. Seems like everything else should be there. Okay, the settings. We don't want that. Okay, so Gradle, Beam, build Gradle. Let's just remove. Gradle, build Gradle, get ignored, tiny tosses, all these folders we needed, settings, Gradle, live, JSP, the Gradle W, Gradle, dotCMS, conf, build. Okay, so everything should be fine right now. So let's try to import it again, like new import Gradle project. Next, the root directory is going to be dotCMS, training, plugin seeds, static, and it's going to be the one that we are working right now, servlet, open it, and finish. Let's see how it goes right now. Okay, synchronizing everything in the Gradle project. Each of the Gradle projects has its own dependencies and its own libraries that it has to download. So we can take a look to, for example, the build.gradle. We have Java 8, we have the jar files that we need to include, for example, the .cms, and if any jar file in the live folder, we are going to include it again. And also we are going to set up the source, like the sources, like the main sources. And that's it. Let's see if we can see the class right now. Okay, we have the hello world servlet, and it doesn't have any problems right here. And what we can do right now is to try to hit that breakpoint again. Okay, the debugger is not attached. Okay, it is attached now. And we want to edit this one in order to add the Java project that we already have in here. We just choose the plugin dotCMS Servlet, and that should be it. Now we are picking up this debugger. So basically the problem that we were having is that I had some remains of the old files from the previous training that I had to clean up first. So basically we are picking up from the remote debugger. We just go into, so you can see, we can see all the variables and all the things that we need for debugging, and we can try something that is called the hot code replacement. But before, let me just go. Okay, hello world servlet. Let me just change this string message. Hello world. Hello from training. And this message is the one that we want to print out here. I'm going to save. The remote debugger is still attached, and let's see if we can pick those changes here. The message is there, hello from training. So instead of hello world servlet, we should be seeing hello from training. This is a little more advanced than what we saw yesterday when setting up the environment, because what we saw yesterday, we were able to set a breakpoint in a dotCMS class and start debugging, but this time we are setting a breakpoint in our own custom code deployed through a plugin. Yesterday was the default ones, and this and today is the own deploying plugin, the static plugin, and this could be in several servers, it could be a Spring controller, all kind of things. This is very cool, being able to debug this locally, just like the project itself. So as you can see, also Eclipse can take advantages of the hot code replacement, the HCR by default. This is a feature in Java and also with the remote debugger, which you can configure it in IntelliJ also. By default is activated in Eclipse. This allows us to immediately view the changes that we make to the source code without having to shut down the server, recompile, and start up the server again. You just have to make sure that you are actually debugging the class, going through the code, and go ahead and make changes, save them, and Eclipse will automatically reveal the project for you. The key aspect to make this work is that you don't get any build problems whatsoever. If you do, Eclipse will not be able to replace your code correctly, and it will not do anything at all. But as you can see it, our code has no problems with that. Eclipse can get a little funky with HCR. As you already saw with the debugger, we need to edit the source lookup in order to find the class that we want to debug, because it is not under the main project. It is not under the main source code, so we need to edit that in order for the debugger to pick up that change. But with the hot code replacement, sometimes the replacement will not work the first time. So maybe you just have to make your changes. Sometimes you have to detach the remote debugging, attach it once more, and hit the breakpoint again. And just make the change and save the file, and it will work. This is extremely useful for making simple modification on the code without having to restart the server. We don't have to recompile anything. We don't have to shut down. We don't have to start anything. So this will work if you have simple or changes inside the same code, inside the same method. If you have to do more complex changes like adding a new class or a new method or changing or adding an instance variables, you will have to recompile and restart .cms as usual. Let's move on to the next example that we have here. It's the one that we call the view tool. It is already being deployed as part of all of the list of plugins that we copy and pasted. So let's take a close look inside this new. Okay, so actually we could import this also. So file, import existing Gradle project. In this case, it will be, instead of Servlet, it will be view tool. We can open it and let's see how it goes. Okay, let's take a look to the first part of this view tool. It's under the configuration and it's the toolbox extender XML. So essentially, the front end of dotCMS is a giant velocity engine that we customize to do some different things. It's the main extension point to dotCMS. The view tools are an approach for providing your own custom solutions, like connecting to an external server, a web service, any kind of server-side processing or communication. Maybe you want to display specific information depending on the current URL or site, or maybe the user session, the user information. Just some new custom logic that you want to implement. Unlike the servlets or the Spring controllers, where you don't have access to that data inside .cms. So in order to map your view tool inside the velocity engine, you need to give that a key, which is the first tag that you see here. The hello world is the key in this specific example. This is the way that you will be able to call your code from velocity in any velocity file. You could create a widget with velocity file. You could create a page with a template with velocities code. You could have a VTL file, so you can execute that inside any of the files that we have. So basically, .cms is a giant velocity engine, and we have this way in order to communicate any Java class logic with the velocity code. So basically, we give the velocity a key. This is how we are going to call from the velocity. Then we have the scope. This defines how the instance of this velocity will be instantiated. It always takes three possible values. It could be an application like this one. This means that the view tool will be a singleton within the application and should be thread safe. These objects are instantiated only once and it will be reused across the request and the context inside of CMS. Also, you can configure it as a request scope. An instance of the view tool is going to be created with every request. The request view tools have access to other parameters like the HTTP server request and the HTTP server response. And you can call methods in those objects in that code. And finally, the third option is the session. An instance of the view tool is created and stored in the user session for each of the requests. So basically right now we are going to handle it like a singleton within the application. So we don't have to, it will be thread safe. We don't have to worry about anything else. And of course, the class that we want to call is going to be the com.cms view tool, hello view tool, that we have also in our static plugin. So let me just go into the source of this here, com.cms view tool and hello view tool. You can, with the view tools, you can pretty much create or call everything inside dotCMS, because inside this class you have access to the whole API, to the .connect framework for the database, for everything. So it's a cool way to communicate between the velocity and the Java code, the Java backend code. You can communicate with other web applications, different extension points, so it works pretty well. As you can see here in this view tool class, we have a method called hello, which is simply returning a string, and this is what we are going to call from our training page. So let's go back to the backend of dotCMS. Let me just close this, and going back to dotcms.com and admin. Let's go back to the site, browser, training folder, training page, and we are going to edit the widget that we were using. Or, yeah, you can edit, it doesn't matter. And here we are going to add a couple of H2, and it's different how we call the macros and the view tools. The view tools are going to be with this dollar symbol, and we are going to match this with the key that we gave to this view tool, that is going to be hello world. So $sign the hello world dot and the method that we want to call inside this class, and it's going to be this one, the hello world. So it's going to be hello parentheses, and that should be it. Look for editing, save and publish. And as you can see, we have the hello world macro and the hello world view tool right here. That's the string that we just saw in the Java class. We also can try to debug it. Let's see if we can try to debug it. Okay, put a breakpoint. The debugger is it attached? Yeah, it's attached. Let's see if we hit this one. I'm going to refresh this. Okay, seems like we didn't hit the page, training page. Okay, here. Okay, so for this view tool, it doesn't know again what code it needs to display here. So we need to edit source lookup, and we could add this Java project, the one that we already have in place, and this one, the view tool. Okay, and now it knows what it looks like, the source code. Seems like it's working. Let's just hit continue, continue, and continue. Okay, so in this case, the request is coming several times, as you can see. I had to hit the continue button several times, and that is because we have a couple of frames in this page. This page, we have a couple of frames that render the page in the backend in the edit mode. This is what we call the edit mode of the page. So these end up hitting the view tool a few times, just something to be aware of. If we take a look to the page in the front end, we can just open a new. Let me just copy this. It will be training and training page. Let me just log out. Remember that I log out because if I keep the session alive with the credentials, I will be redirected to the page inside the edit mode, and that's not what I like, what I want. So training and training page, / training page. Try to hit this one. Okay, so this is the first time that we hit the debugger, and that's it. It's not going to redirect me to anything, and it's going to be just one render, and that's how the training page is going to look when it's published and is user have access to your site. Also, we can go ahead and try to debug this view tool using the hotcode replace. Let me just string message by, instead of the hello world, we are going to send the message here. I'm going to save. I'm going to hit this page again. Okay, so the message, as you can see here, it's by, and it's returning that message. So it picked up correctly the new variable and it's returning the new one instead of the hard-coded string that we had in there. So I'll hit continue. And as you can see, it's replaced in the front end. Again, this is very useful for the development. I can test my changes right away without having to redeploy my plugin, without having to shut down the server. I don't have to recompile from start up server again. And of course, I shut down, I will need to redeploy, and what I want to be able to see my own code immediately and make changes very quickly. So this is pretty much the core of the custom development in dotCMS. Everything else, it's much like this. This is how it works, and this is how we expect you to do it. And we actually build our entire support system using tools I have shown so far, and I will show later on. So for some of the sites that we have deployed, that we have built inside of our infrastructure, all are built inside dotCMS. We deployed several plugins and some custom logic, and the development is pretty fast and efficient and easy to learn. So you will get access to all the advantages of dotCMS, such templates, permissions, pages, and you can inject your own custom logic, what we call the extension points. What I want to do now is kind of walk you through some of the other pieces of functionality to wrap up the session today. Also, I want to remind, before I forget, you guys to check out the documentation in our dotCMS site. Let me just go to dotCMS.com. And inside the resources, we have the documentation. And you can go inside developing, and we have a special part for the static plugins here. You can see several examples regarding what you can do with the static plugins. So it is a good idea for you guys to take a look to these pages if you want to dig deeper into all the features that the plugin sets, all of those static plugins provides. Okay, so okay, so let's talk a little bit about the pages, or as we call it, portlets. So the backend of dotCMS is basically a group of portlets. Years ago, when we forked live-rate code and built several portlets inside of it, this is what our system is made of, a large collection of portlets. So let's say you want to add your own section to the backend, just like the ones that we have, just like the site browser, the content search, the maintenance, the configuration, the user, and so on. These are all different portlets. So if you need your own tooling in the backend, this is how you would do it. Now, what I'm going to do is to go through all the files and make sure that you understand, because there are several files that are, they depend on the file, on the plugin name. So for example, in this case, the plugin name of our portlet example is com.cms portlet. So I would like to go through all the files and make sure that you note where you have to change that name if you want to change the name of the that you will probably do, probably want change the name of the static plugin. So let me just close this. And okay, the first file that we want to take a look is this one. It's the portlet, this is the com.cms portlet and the portlet XML. Okay. Seems like we have some XML problems. I thought we removed that validation yesterday. Let me just double check. It was validation here. It seems like it's still checking. Okay, just and reveal building the project name. Okay, in the meantime, basically this portlet X, remember the extender, the hyphen X, it means extender. This contains the definition of an example portlet that we are going to use. In this case, I have two portlets deployed. A velocity portlet is the first one, and then I have an structs portlet, the second one. You can always use also the JSP portlets. They are a lot simpler. You just point out the JSP file and basically just deploy it. This is basically something that you do once, and it's not like you will changing this parameter constantly. So it is fairly common practice to just copy and paste the portlet definition and change the values accordingly instead of typing all of them from scratch. Let me just show you an example of this JSP, if I can find some on the original portlet XML. And let me just search here for JSP portlet. Okay. This is how we define that. You can use this as a base for your own portlet if you want to include or develop a new portlet, a JSP portlet. This is how you would do it. You can just do this as a, okay, the whole code replacement failed, but we don't need it anymore, so I'm going to disconnect the remote debugging. You can use this as your own portlet, just change the values and the display names and it will work. So back to the example of the portlets that we have. Okay, so we have the velocity and the structs. There is a couple of lines here. For example, here in line 9, as you can see, we are calling, we are trying to call this velocity that is going to be living inside the static plugins com.cms portlet view. And this is very similar to what we do, what we saw in this example of the JSPs. For example, everything inside JSPs are being copied inside HTML, sorry, HTML plugins and the plugin name. This is something similar, but with the velocity. It's going to be under static plugins, the plugin name, portlet view. So as you can see, this is hard-coded inside the portlet extender XML file. So if you want to change this name, com.cms portlet, you will need to change also this. Let's open the other one that is going to be structs config extender. And we can take a look to the definition here. Okay, so this is basically an struct action that it will result to our code and point to a couple of forwards, as you can see here. Those forwards are going to point to a couple of tiles that we have in this file. That is tiles definition extender. As you can see, this is old school structs. I think it's very old. It's like version 1. 0.2, 0.4, something like that. So there are a couple of paths that we need also to update here. So instead of the com.cms portlet, like this one and like this one, you are going to, if you rename this static plugin, you are going to also need to change this JSP. And in this case, this is the exact case that we were seeing here, the JSPs with these JSPs that we have in here with the plugin name. And last, we're going to see this one, the live rate portlet extender. We just add the reference to the new portlets that we want to create here. This one is the main file that will link the portlets with the new code that you might input in here. The IDs in here, they are going to match with the portlet names set up in here. So for example, we take one of these and just copy and search for it in here. Is this one, the X hello, and the other portlet name, the structs hello world, is going to be this one. Now a couple of directories that we want to see. It's, for example, the static velocity here. Inside portlet view-vm, this is the same view-vm that we are trying to match in here, the one that I told you that we have to change if we rename it. This is the one. It's on the static velocity portlet view-vm. It's going to be living after deploying this plugin on the static plugins com.cms portlet, and portlet view-vm. Also, the folder is being mapped to the right from the portlet view portion of the map. As you can see, here the portlet and then the view. The name of our portlet. And also there was another file that I want to look here. It was under, let me just find it. Okay, actually the view hello world, this is what it's going to print out depending on the URL that we visit. But there was another file. Okay, the JSP that we link here. Here in the tags definition, these are the JSP that are under here. Structs hello world, and view hello. And then this one, the language extender properties. This is how we extend also the language properties that we have by default. And in this case, it's going to be com.cms repackage. Remember that we repackage everything, so most of the imports or keys like this have a repackage in the name. Then Java's portlet title, and this is the title that we are going to use. I think it was in here, X hello world. And they are going to be rendered with the language property to test velocity portlet and test structs hello world. One thing that some of the clients have noted in here is why we don't use the root folder instead of having this static velocity and also the JSP folders. Because if you put something in the root folder, it will be a copy and paste inside the same path that you write down in here. So for example, if you put root, I don't know, webinf classes and something right in there is going to be placed under the Tomcat web apps root webinf classes at the same file. So some clients have asked why we don't use the root folder in this example. We could, but when this approach was created, we didn't have the root directory in the plugin structure. The root directory is like the latest things that we added to the static plugins. So remember that how the root directory works. So whatever you put in there, it will automatically be placed where it's supposed to go. We recommend using the root directory to handle things because it is much more flexible and you can just basically point from the system, create your own directories, stick the files into them, and the files will just make their way in. We will have to, actually, we will have never created the placeholder like the static files or the JSP or the static velocity if we had the root folder in place at that time. But these are two different ways of doing the same thing. But of course, we cannot break the whole way of doing it because there are a lot of clients doing it right now. The same thing happens with the JSP directory. We have the JSPs in there that are linked here in the DAO definition extender XML. So let's see if we can run our example. So let me just go to the backend of the CMS, go to the admin. So pretty much this is the description of what files you need to take into the consideration when working with any of these two portlets in here. The good thing about using the other kind, the JSP portlet that I mentioned before, is that it doesn't need any other config files. You pretty much just point out the value of the JSP and that's it. So it's basically the same you do with the velocity portlet. Is the strokes folder, strokes portlet, the one with more configuration files and such? It involves examples on how to add config parameters, so the port X, the strokes configs, the titles dev files. So it is a little, it's slower than all the others. The velocity or the JSP portlets are more straightforward, but of course this is a personal choice in the end based on your needs or requirements. Now, it is also important here to understand the difference between a view tool and the portlet. Now that we have covered both concepts, the view tool is just a Java class that you expose through the velocity. That's it, a class that you can call through velocity code. It's an extension point. And the portlet is a backend. This is important. This is only a backend tool you can create to expose more information or add more features to your dotCMS admins or the content editors or the content authors. It's just a new window that you will see when you log into the backend of dotCMS. And that's how we create our own portlets back there. You can always take a look to the portlet XML file, the default one that we have, and you will see all the kind of portlets that we have and how to use them for your own examples. So let's go into the backend, and inside the system, the roles and tools, and here in the left pane, we expand the one that is called System and select CMS Administrator. This is the role that I have right now because I am logged in as the admin user. So, for example, the admin user, we select this admin user. Here in the right tab that is called Tools, we just double click where we want to place that. So for example, I am logged in as an admin, so the CMS administrator role is the one that I have. And that's the all tools that I can see right now. For example, home, site, content is the same. Home, site, content, and each of the portlets inside of that. See, ending by system. So for example, let's say that I want to add those two new portlets in the home. I just click anywhere near the word key. And here in the home, I can see all the portlets or the tools that we have already in place. We have the tasks, as you can see here, and we have the dashboard. So what we have to do now is just to search for the test portlets that we have. The test structs hello world, just click it and add it. And then the test velocity portlet, add it again. So we will end up with 4 different portlets inside the home, and just save. As you can see, this is reloaded automatically. If not, you can always go and reload the page. go inside the home, and we have the both of the new portlets of the new tools created in here. So let's go into the hello test strokes hello. So this is just printing out hello world and maximize view. And the other one, the test velocity portlet, hello velocity, and the current date is this one. As you can see, it will change every time that we open this portlet. So if we go back to the view VM that I saw in here, we are setting some of the velocity things. This is a markup that is displayed with text velocity and the current system date. This example portlet uses a view tool that we already provide by default. It's out of the box, that is called date. Remember the $sign and the key. This is a view tool that we provide out of the box. It has a utility method to handle, date utility method to handle. So this is what I meant with building our own backend tool. This is a good extension point, and in the admin console you can access your own tabs and do whatever you need in them. This is one of the many cool features of dotCMS, that you can extend our system as much as you need to meet your expectations or requirements. And the view tools are very useful for displaying data on the front end. It's not that common to use view tools to display in the backend. You can use it as we just saw, but most of the view tools that we have are used in order to expose data into the front end user. The portlets are the ones that try to create, for example, if you want to create a list of other roles, maybe you have an LDAP roles that you don't want to sync here, but you can access them via, I don't know, REST or something like that, some REST information that you might access, and you want to expose that just to your content editors or your content admins. You can use that. You can use the portlets and build a new one to just display that. Okay, so after this example, let me just close everything here and minimize these ones. The only one that we have left is the hook, the dotCMS hook. Let me just open this one and the configuration and plugin controller properties. Okay, so the Content API pre-hooks and the Content API post-hooks, they refer to something that we call hooks. As I mentioned it earlier, a hook is basically a way for us to provide, let's say, AOP kind of pattern, the aspect-oriented programming. We only provide it for content, for the content class and the content API. In dotCMS, a content is anything that has a content type, such as the sites, the files, the HTML pages, of course, the content itself, the widgets, and the generic contents. Everything that where you have a content type, that's a content. Remember that the content types were previously known as a structure. So you are going to see several references to variables, methods, classes names in the source code, where we use the word structure, but just bear in mind that is the old name. They are known as content type now, and we are going to, as we update some of the classes, we reflect these changes from the structure to the new concept. So the content, every content will eventually run through the Content API, which is one of the main APIs where you can get, remember that find is like checking out, and the checking in is like saving something into the database. The pre-hook, this one here, the pre-hook allows you to execute custom code before any method of the Content API. And the post hook, this one here, allows you to run the code on the aftermath of any of the methods called in the Content API. This is very useful for intercepting content before or after being saved into the database. You can, for example, internally modify the values of the content before checking it in, or you can send an email to one or more people right after a content has been checked in, which is useful, for example, in a support system to notify users when a comment was added or a ticket has been modified. So let's open this one, the Hello World content pre-hook should be under the source. And take a look to, I think, well, first, as I mentioned earlier too, these are all methods that exist in the content API pre-hook in the core project, but you don't really need to have to put them all in here. Just override the ones that you need. Let me just go into the method checkout. It's like here, line 190, and you will see that we are just sending here. We are just sending information about the content to the log whenever the user tries to check out a content. When the checkout method in the API is called. So if we go ahead and modify any content in dotCMS, let me just go science. Remember, taking into consideration that all of these examples work because we copy and pasted the complete list of examples that we have. If you are developing a new one, you will need to keep the independent project and keep copy and pasting and then deploying that specific plugin in order to see changes inside dotCMS. But these, as you already saw, these are complete examples, so we just copy and paste it and it works. So let me just go to the content, search, take a look to one of the, for example, training widgets. Let's just change something like this and save and publish. Okay, so similar to the post hook, this will allow you to log information on the content right after the method has been called, as I already told you. As you can see here, the Hello World plugin pre-hook about to get content with inode, and this is the inode that is that I got from the pre-hook. So it says it means that it's before we save it. So for example, let's go to edit this specific one and history. And as you can see, the inode was the one that belonged to this identifier, but before saving the new version. So this is why we included in the checkout in order to see the old inode. So the next time that we check out or save anything, we are going to see this one, the current one. We just, because this is the new, this is the current inode before checking anything else. So save and publish. Here, the 5.1a. If we go to edit, we have a new version, the latest one, but this one was the one that was called when it passed through the checkout method in here. And this is the content inode that we are printing here. Okay, so this is the core functionality that we have for building static plugins. Remember that we are covering basic examples of what you can do in dotCMS. You have access to the documentation. You can deploy your own servlets, filters, full libraries. You can do a lot more of what we just showed you today. These are very basic pieces, but you can take them and create much more complex structures.